All right. Well, hello, everyone. How are you guys doing? It is me, Yi, as always. So today, Peter, who is my host and co-host, and I, Jackson, your favorite co-host, are going to be continuing through our book, Did Man Get Here by Evolution or by Creation, which was published in 1967, featuring all the cutting-edge creationist arguments of today. 60 years ago, or 50 years ago, whatever. Anyway, all right. Peter, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
Oh, terrific.
Great.
I just had work, and now I'm here.
Well, you're not
And
here. You're somewhere else, because I don't hear any.
I'm around.
And I don't hear any water sounds. So you're not here.
That's true. In a slightly different locale than normal.
Elsewhere.
No toilet noises, as you like to say. All right. So let's see I just opened up YouTube. So let's see who do we have in our side chat today.
We have Brian Stevens, who was here first.
Yep.
And we have Mackenzie Brown.
Whoops. I'm hearing it. Oops. I'm trying to get it started. Okay. All right. Well, let's just get into the book. All right. Okay. Ready, Peter?
I'm ready.
So,
I mean, this is...
We're in chapter 4. What does the fossil record show?
Oh, goody.
So, we were talking about the Cambrian last time, and that's where we're picking up again. Quote, these same conclusions are drawn in Natural History magazine of October 1959 in an article entitled Darwin and the Fossil Record. Quote, from the beginning of the Cambrian up through the rest of the geological sequence, we have an abundant representation of animal life at every stage. Even in lower Cambrian formations, marine invertebrates are numerous and varied. Below this, there are vast thicknesses of sediments in which the progenitors of the Cambrian forms should be expected. But we do not find them. These older beds are almost barren of evidence of life, and the general picture could reasonably be said to be consistent with the idea of a special creation at the beginning of Cambrian times. To the question why we do not find rich fossiliferous deposits belonging to those assumed earliest periods prior to the Cambrian system, said Darwin, I can give no satisfactory answer, nor can we today. Close quote. How is this fact explained away? The evolutionist who made this last admission stated, quote, the objection is based merely on negative evidence, which experience often shows to be worthless, close quote. In other words, although evolutionists find no Precambrian fossils, the record being 3/4 blank, they contend that evolution took place anyway because the total lack of evidence is merely negative evidence. Okay, so sort of broad strokes what we talked about last time with PZ. Despite the fact that in the 1960s there were not really Precambrian fossils known, there definitely are now. We mentioned Eulingia and Icaria and Dickinsonia and Namicalathus and all those other forms last time, which are some of them are bilaterians, some are stem bilaterians. We have Trilobizoa, which is a clade of stem eumetazoans. So we definitely have representatives of animals in both in the Precambrian and then definitely throughout the Cambrian, which show the stepwise acquisition of different morphological characters. So in the case of arthropods, for instance, we have stem arthropods in the Cambrian, such as Opabinia and Amylocaris. We have the lobopods, which are like the armored worms. Basically, they look like worms with legs, essentially, and they were the ancestors of the velvet worms, the tardigrades, and the arthropods, which are all called the panarthropods. And they have a whole radiation, which resulted in those three phyla, which I just mentioned. And we also have the bivalved arthropods, which may be paraphyletic. They may be both stem and crown group arthropods. It's up in the air right now. It's very contentious. And new Cambrian and Precambrian fossils are found all the time, like Calintia is another stem arthropod very close to the base of Arthropoda, but falling just outside. So, in essence, we have lots and lots and lots of fossils, which the creationists don't want to talk about. At this time, of course, they didn't have all of those fossils, which is understandable. But today, we do have those fossils, and yet we still hear these same talking points, don't we, Peter? I can't hear you.
I said, yes, we do. Sorry. Yeah, I did miss a tiny part of what you read because I was trying to get to the page where we are. And so...
Oh, I'm sorry.
It says, borrow unavailable. Another patron is using this book.
That's me.
I'm guessing I know this patron. So we're extremely lucky, because if anyone else was reading this book, we would be up some creek. I'll refrain from any bad words, but we would be up some sort of creek.
It's a little funny, Peter. The idea of a file being used by one person means it is exhausted on the internet. I think that's a little funny.
Yeah, I mean. So it is funny, because I did log in, and then the first thing you see when you actually log in is the Internet Wayback Machine. Enter URL.
Yep.
Which is kind of funny. I mean, we're reading Wayback, so yeah, they got that part right. How did they know this? That's true. Are they hacking our computers? Do they see us? I don't know. Never mind.
I do think it's also kind of funny that it says the evolutionists find no Precambrian fossils, so that's just wrong, of course. The record being 3/4 blank, that's no. We have fossils today of organisms going back to 3.8 billion years ago.
Mm-hmm.
We have bacteria fossils from 3.8 billion years ago. So clearly this is wrong.
Jackson, but that is today. That wasn't in 1967. What did we have?
That's true. That's not their fault.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is
in fairness, though. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, which is why the thing is that the truth will always be the same. Yes, but if we discover more of the truth, then what we say needs to be changed, which is pretty much what we're talking about. So the Bible may have been right at some point regarding our knowledge, but we're past that. We're long past that.
It was the best they could do at the time, and so it's not that it's wrong per se. It's just that's what they thought they knew at the time, and we've moved past that, and that's fine. Like if everybody looked at the Bible that way, for instance, like this is the best data they had at the time, then I feel like we wouldn't have a problem, right? But that's not how they look at it. They look at it as this is the ultimate truth and it will never be wrong. Right?
Here's the thing. Today, because I'm a masochist, I watched 2 shows on Ross channel where he featured Nadir Ahmed talking about scientific errors in the Quran. And one thing, at least for me, stood out, because Nadir Ahmed is probably one of the most dishonest interlocutors he can come across on the interwebs. So he has his own explanations on why the Quran is right. So, for instance, saying that the seminal fluid goes between the ribs and the backbone, he explains that away by saying you can look down, and then you can look behind your ribs. So you're looking between your ribs and your backbone, and then you will see your your reproductive system. That's not how that works. I mean, Texas isn't in between California and New York if you go stand in Mexico. It doesn't work that way. It just doesn't.
Yeah.
I mean, but what the thing that he brought up is, and this was, it was the thing about the sun traveling and the moon following it. And he says, well, it looks that way from Earth. Yeah, it does. But here's the thing.
Right.
The book you pretend to be the inerrant word of your God. Where's your God standing? Did he write the book while he was standing on the earth and didn't have a clue about what he created? Same thing goes with Christians. If everything in the Bible is according to the scientific standard of the day, then apparently it wasn't written by a God. Because the God should have known better.
Right. Right. And that's one of the things, like, you know, if an all-powerful God had written the Bible, or any holy book, for instance, like, what would it include? Well, probably, I would imagine, some sort of language and counting system that was universal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Something that everybody could use and that would be relatively easy to use. Tips for, like, you know, maybe medical procedures, or, you know, like the germ theory of disease, about
you mean
where the universe came from.
You mean because I recently got blocked on Twitter. Someone pointed out that the Bible said you need to wash your hands in streaming water. Yes, it also said that you can cure leprosy by getting a piece of wood, hyssop, and 2 birds. You kill one, you then dip the other one in the blood mixed with the wood and the hyssop, and then you sprinkle it over the leper, and he'll be cured. Yeah.
Sounds legit. That sounds about right.
I mean, that is in your Bible. Congratulations. Top-notch science there. I mean,
well, right. I mean, the whole thing about having sheep mating while looking at cross sticks means that their offspring will have, like, stripes on them.
Mm-hmm.
Or cattle. Sorry, it was cattle. But the point remains, like, no, that just fundamentally isn't how genetics works.
No. Although there are, so, and I didn't have my camera and it was too far away from my phone to get it. I did take a picture. I did saw striped cows close to where I live. So I am going to investigate and see whether or not I can find the stick. There has to be one. I mean, there were black cows with a big white stripe going right across them.
Of course.
So.
Okay, I'll read to the end of this page. I'll read to the start of the subchapter.
Okay.
The next one. One final thing. The whole bit about negative evidence. The thing about negative evidence is it's not so much that they're appealing to negative evidence, they're making a prediction. Darwin made the prediction that there would be fossils found which confirm his theory, and he was right in the pre-Cambrian layers. So they're not saying, you know, absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. They're saying, I predict that we will find these things, which is not what negative evidence is. So that's also a what do you call it? Equivocation. So it's equivocation on their part. But anyway, what's new, right?
Well, what's new is that the chat is responding. Mackenzie Brown says belted cows, and then Monkey for Banana says the black cows with a white stripe are called belted Galloways. I did not know that.
Very interesting.
So
I did not know that either. You learn something new every day.
Someone confirms my story that the cows that I saw actually exist, and probably confirmed that there was no stick involved. There goes that myth.
All right.
Okay.
So
let's continue.
Quote, such a conclusion is utterly unscientific. The scientific method of finding truth is to support conclusions with facts, and when they are lacking, to reject the conclusions. Further, showing the determination of evolutionists to hold their conclusions despite a lack of supporting facts is a subtitle in the same article that says, in the century since Darwin's controversial theory first appeared, paleontologists have established a solid foundation for evolution. But then the article goes on to show, as already noted, that the majority of the fossil record needed for the theory is completely devoid of facts and evidence. Can this, except by sheer credulity, be called a solid foundation for the theory? What would you think if a builder told you he had built a solid foundation for a building, but upon investigating, you found there was nothing at all, no concrete, no steel, no wood, no supporting material of any kind, just empty space where the strong foundation should have been? Would you consider such a void a solid foundation for a building because it was just negative evidence? No, we cannot escape the scientific facts regarding this matter. The fossil record of the Earth supports a sudden creation, not a slow evolution from primitive forms of life. Close quote. Okay, so a couple of things. So first of all, that's not really how science works. When you propose, if you propose a hypothesis and you don't have any evidence that necessarily disconfirms your hypothesis, then you don't have to discount it just because there isn't evidence in support of it. Another way to put it is, we're not saying you're wrong. We're just saying we don't know you're right. So you can't say this hypothesis is wrong. The most you can say is we don't know if it's correct. And so what they're saying is, because what they're saying is the absence of evidence is the evidence of absence, which is fallacious, as I'm pretty sure everybody knows. And so,
which is also something they don't apply to their God. The thing,
precisely, right? Right, exactly. So that's not really how science works. First of all, second, there was a firm paleontological foundation for evolutionary theory even in Darwin's day. I mean, we've talked repeatedly about the fact that Archaeopteryx was found just 2 years after Origin of Species was published, which Darwin predicted. We talked about Halotherium last time, and Dorodon was the other one I was trying to remember. That Dorodon and Basilosaurus, which are whales, not lizards, despite the name, which still had hind limbs because whales are descended from terrestrial hoofed mammals. Mm-hmm. So they still have the hind limbs. What else did they have? Oh, they had the whole horse sequence in Darwin's day, or at the very least at the end of the 1800s. They had the whole sequence from like Hyracotherium to Myohippus to Pliohippus to modern Equus. They had that whole series by the late 1800s. So again, if we're by the time this book is written, we do have good fossil evidence for evolution. Yes. It's not like all the fossils, just came out in the past and since then. No, there was already a strong foundation. I mean, the history of the Earth was divided into successive periods based on the rocks and the index fossils, right? So an index fossil is you find a certain species which only exists in one layer on the Earth and nowhere else. It doesn't exist above or below that one specific layer. And no matter where you go, if you're in the US and you find this, like an ammonite, for instance, in this late Cretaceous layer, well, if you go to Madagascar or Nigeria or, England or China, and you look in the exact same age layer, you're going to find that same ammonite species. That's what an index fossil is. And so paleontologists already knew about those by the time this book was written. Mm-hmm. So that's another way we know that the Earth has to be old. Index fossils don't make any sense if the Earth is young. Because if you think of index fossils sort of like a clock, all the clocks should start at the same time. They should start at the same time. They shouldn't start at different times, right? A clock that started, or different clocks that start at different times, is what we expect on an old Earth. Same for radiometric dating methods. If the Earth is 6 to 10,000 years old, all the radiometric dating methods should give us the same date, right? Mm-hmm. We should see the same sort of pattern for all of them, but we don't. They're all over the place. Some have extremely, long half-lives. Some have extremely short half-lives. Some in the middle. And so that's indicative of an old Earth. And
the
creationists have no explanation for that.
And the weird thing is that we've got multiple methods, and when we apply these methods which overlap each other, they all point to a similar age for the specific rock that we were testing. Another thing is that this all starts out with dendrochronology, which is a real science. Right. We can go back, I think, what was it, 25,000 years? Somewhat?
It's a pretty long ways back with trees, yeah.
Yes. So, and that confirms also part of the radiometric dating. So, yeah, isn't it funny that we have all these lines of evidence all converging on the same thing? Although I have to say that I zoned out a little bit at the start when you said the scientific method of finding truth. And that immediately made me spiral down towards a debate you once had. And
which was also about the Cambrian,
and radio.
The hilarious thing about that debate.
Yes.
Well, the funny thing about that debate with finding truth, which he's not interested in doing actually, is he challenged me to a debate about the Cambrian.
Yep.
Because he knew that was something I was interested in, or am interested in. And our debate, so my opening statement lays out all of this information about the Cambrian, how we know what we know about the Cambrian and the time periods, all that sort of stuff. His opening statement was ostensibly not about the Cambrian, and at no point throughout the rest of the debate did we talk about the Cambrian.
Exactly.
He went straight to information, which he didn't understand. And he kept saying, like, oh, trilobite has more information than Dickinsonia, to which I just said, I don't know that. And he didn't have an argument, because we don't know how many genes trilobites had or Dickinsonia had. We have no idea. And so it was just...
It was
nonsense.
A very frustrating debate if you were going to watch a debate about the Cambrian, because, as you said, it wasn't mentioned other than in your opening statement, and from there on, it was about everything but the Cambrian, which
also
is mind-boggling.
Right. Yes, you are correct. Also, Smitty points out the absence of evidence is evidence of absence where such evidence should be expected if the proposition is true.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah. If you expect... Yeah, I mean, there are certain times when if you predict something in particular and it's not there and it necessarily should be given your hypothesis, then yes, the absence of that would be the evidence of absence. But the problem with the fossil record is you can't make predictions like that, as probably most of you know, because the fossil record is extremely spotty. There are regions that experience high rates of erosion, regions that don't. You have Lagerstätten in other regions. It's a complete scattershot. We can't make predictions about like what percent of some environment should be preserved in the fossil record, for instance. But we don't really need to, because we have more than enough fossils to make the case for us. So,
and we're still finding new ones. So in 2019, a new species of ancient whale was found in my country, and that wasn't the first time that they found a new species in my country. So yeah, we're still getting more and more information, more pieces of the puzzle, and yes, we're going to find. Say again?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
What I'm saying is that if you make a puzzle, you will have small blocks that will fit in somewhere in the puzzle. That's where we are right now. So we have this. We think it might go right here. If we get more parts, it may be that it's going over there. It is pieces of the puzzle which is becoming more and more complete. And yes, we're going to find mistakes. We're going to find that certain animals are put in maybe in the wrong clade, or maybe in the wrong place in the clade. That is to be expected. If you don't have all the pieces of the puzzle, then you cannot be 100% certain, which is why science is provisional and doesn't claim to be 100% certain about anything.
Yep. Exactly right. Yeah. I was just gonna say, Peter. I don't know. Have they found you yet? Are you a new species?
No, yeah. This fossil is somewhere in the woods, and there are not a lot of excavations in the woods because the Netherlands doesn't have a lot of woods. So you leave those alone. You don't go excavate there because there's not a lot of green here anyway. So whatever we have, we need to conserve that. So if you're a fossil, that's the best place to hang out if you don't want to be found.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Alrighty. So I'll read, I guess, this new subchapter through the next page.
Okay.
Where are the links? About 3/4 of the evolutionary chain is missing. But what about the fossils that have been found? Do they provide the needed evidence for proving evolution? Does the fossil record supply the links, at least in the last quarter of the evolutionary chain? Let us consider the facts. Regarding so-called links, Charles Darwin stated, quote, "What if species have descended from other species by fine gradations? Do we not everywhere see innumerable transitional forms? Why is not all nature in confusion instead of the species being, as we see them, well defined? But as by this evolution theory, innumerable transitional forms must have existed, why do we not find them embedded in countless numbers in the crust of the earth? Geological research does not yield the infinitely many fine gradations between past and present species required." Close quote. How did Darwin explain this lack of links? He declared, quote, "I believe the answer lies in the record being incomparably less perfect than is generally supposed," close quote. But then, in a later chapter, he says, quote, "If we confine our attention to any one formation, it becomes much more difficult to understand why we do not therein find closely graduated varieties between the allied species," close quote. Has this picture changed in the years since Darwin's time? Have links between major groups of living things been found in the fossil record? Note what the world-famous evolutionary scholar George Gaylord Simpson of Harvard University said in his book, The Major Features of Evolution. Quote, "It remains true, as every paleontologist knows, that most new species, genera, and families, and that nearly all new categories above the level of families appear in the record suddenly and are not led up to by known gradual, completely continuous transitional sequences," close quote. The same fact is noted by, that should be Alfred Romer, zoology professor from Harvard University, writing in the book Genetics, Paleontology, and Evolution. Hey, I have that book. Also from the 50s. Writing in his book, edited by prominent evolutionists Glenn L. Jepson, Ernst Mayr, and George Gaylord Simpson. He says, quote, "In rapid evolutionary changes in animal lines, the process may have been a typically neo-Darwinian one of the accumulation of numerous small adaptive mutations, but an accumulation at an unusually rapid rate. Unfortunately, there is in general little evidence on this point in the fossil record, for intermediate evolutionary forms representative of this phenomenon are extremely rare. Links are missing just where we most fervently desire them, and it is all too probable that many links will continue to be missing." Close quote. All right, so let's dig into this. So again, 3/4 of the fossil record is not missing. We have it.
I'm just wondering. Where did they get the number 3/4 from? If we can't tell anything by the fossils.
So what they're saying is, if the Earth is, well, I mean, it's still about 3/4. I guess thinking by today's standards, but still, so they're saying if the Cambrian to today is 1/4 of Earth's history, there are no Precambrian fossils, right? And the Precambrian is the other 3/4. So they're saying there are 0 Precambrian fossils, which again is wrong. We have loads and loads of Precambrian fossils. We have bacteria. We have eukaryotes, both multicellular and unicellular. We have animals. We have algae, all sorts of stuff going on in the Precambrian that we are continuing to learn about as more formations are described. And I mean, quoting Darwin on this doesn't really help. I mean, his work was a century old by the time this book was written or was published. So I don't know anybody who writes contemporary scientific papers who appeal to works from like 100 years ago. Nobody does that. They don't care. They care what is the most recent research on the subject, what has been published, preferably within the last like 5 years, right? No one's going, let me see what they said back in in 1922 on this subject. No, come on. No one does that.
To be honest, if you watch any of Kent Hovind's presentations, you will notice that the slides, because he will be stupid enough to put the source of his slide at the bottom of the slide, and I mean, there are things that he claims are the last cutting edge things in scientific findings that go back 150 years ago, 100 years ago. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to these people, because if they find something in any specific era that would corroborate their story, that is evidence. If then after that a newer finding comes in that disproves their position, yeah, that can't be evidence. There has to be something wrong with that. This is the dishonesty that is so utterly frustrating when talking to creationists. This is the ultimate double standard when looking at science, only to confirm their point of view. It's a confirmation bias fight that you won't break.
Yeah, absolutely. It's which is funny because, again, in science, it's the opposite, right? If you have a hypothesis and it seems reasonably well tested, then some piece of evidence comes along which says, well, no, this isn't quite how it is. You need to look at a broader picture per se. What you were looking at was this one specific thing, but if you broaden your scope, it's not quite that way, or something like that. Then that's how hypotheses move forward. That's how science moves forward. Like, for instance, I've been reading about a concept in biology called R and K selection. So these are basically ideas about how organisms adapt to environments. So, like, if they have highly unstable environments, they're more likely to organisms are more likely to adapt smaller sizes and have more offspring, and they live shorter lives. Whereas if they have more stable environments, they grow to be larger. They have fewer offspring at a time, but they have offspring more than once throughout their lifetimes. And that's part of it, but that's not the whole picture. There are other factors we have to consider. It's not technically wrong. It's just not the whole thing, right? Yeah. And so by adding more evidence to this hypothesis, does a fuller picture emerge? Because, as you said, it's like a puzzle. Yeah. And we have some of the pieces, but we're adding more. And so that, and then this, I just have to go on a tangent here. This is why I hate a lot of science reporting, because articles are written all the time for clicks that say, everything scientists know about this thing has been overturned. No, that's not how science works either. When it's always something like new hominin fossil completely disproves all the ideas about the evolution of Homo. No, it doesn't. It just adds like this one extra data piece over here. Like, okay, that's cool. They also evolved over here. Like, no, the stuff we knew about these other guys is still correct. That wasn't overturned. It's just we also added this new piece over here. Mm-hmm. And I hate when articles are written like that. I hate it so much. But yeah.
Speaking of that,
that's sort of what they're doing here.
Speaking of that, so next week we're also doing a show. I am planning on asking a very, very frustrating question to the guest that we will have on right there. And so I've spoken. So we did a show. I did a show with Arn Ra.
Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned that we were going to have a special guest on our show, and he said, "You need to ask him the same question I asked him." And I said, "Yeah, And I probably know title of the book exactly. So,
Yeah, well, I think we should keep it a surprise.
mm-hmm.
We'll tell you what. We'll release it like next Monday. We'll say who we're having on or something like that. We'll
That's
release it.
that would be a good thing.
All right.
People might be surprised.
I know I was surprised to hear back from him. I didn't expect it. Where else? There was something else I wanted to say. Oh, the thing about George Gaylord Simpson. Okay, so what I think that's the quote from Simpson where he's talking about the idea that's sort of the forerunner to punctuated equilibrium, where you basically have so there are these ideas in evolution, and um, they're not discontinuous. They're like one continuous idea. There's a gradient. So you have what's called phyletic gradualism, which is where you have this slow evolution of different clades proliferating in different directions. And then you have, and so that's the very slow evolution that Darwin was talking about. That's called phyletic gradualism. Well, on the other hand, you have what's called punctuated equilibrium. And this idea basically says you have periods of rapid evolution followed by periods of prolonged morphological stasis. Now, these ideas are not exclusive, they're not mutually exclusive. You can have both. And in fact, punctuated equilibrium requires aspects of gradualism. You have periods of very slow, gradual change punctuated by periods of very rapid change. So it's not like you just have one or the other. Well, I believe that's what Simpson is talking about because he was one of the pioneering ideas on rates of evolution. He talked about it, and I think Romer also talked about it. And then you have Niles Eldredge and Stephen Jay Gould in the late 1970s, who also sort of formalized that idea into punctuated equilibrium. And so that's kind of what he's saying here. He's not. They're not saying that no transitional fossils exist. They're saying that they're referring to the rate at which nucleids tend to arise, often results in a lack of fossils because typically you might have a small population, which then undergoes very rapid evolution, and then proliferates, and then your new species results from a very small population, which then undergoes rapid evolution, proliferates, etc. And so it can be the case that you have, if you don't have a lot of fossils in the record which showed this process. But again, the thing is, we do have those fossils. We do have examples of punctuated equilibrium in the fossil record. That's what we have with index fossils. We have like stasis. We have this morphological stasis for a period of time in which the climate has stabilized, and then the climate slightly changes, and then you have evolution of like forams or ammonites or whatever. So they evolve to adapt to their new climate, then they stabilize. And so when you go through the record in places where you have very, very fine records, is you see these very gradual transitions as you go from top to bottom in the forams or whatever. You can see these changes, which at first are very minor, but become more and more pronounced as you go up the record. And again, there's both gradualism and punctuated equilibrium. Both of those ideas play a role in that evolution. So it's clearly not the case that there are no transitional fossils.
I have one thing, because you've mentioned it a couple of times so far. And so what I'm intending to do is, when I'm going to speak with a creationist, I want to point them to this particular show and go watch that. You've mentioned a couple of times index fossils, something that we know that creationists are completely distorting by saying, oh, they date the rocks by the fossils and they date the fossils by the rocks. This is circular reasoning. So can we just take a few minutes to explain what index fossils are and why it is not circular reasoning? Because it really drives me crazy. People hear something and then think they understand it and then completely misinterpret it. And then again, to make it fit their narrative.
Yeah, absolutely. The funny thing about that argument that we date the fossils with the rocks and the rocks with the fossils is it's sort of like the argument about ERVs that says, well, if they're functional, they're not ERVs. It's like it's completely missing the point of the argument. It's just a complete just swing and a miss.
Mm-hmm.
So index fossils are, like I mentioned earlier, they're fossils which exist in very particular layers across the planet. So I used an ammonite earlier. The ammonite I was referring to was, or I was thinking about, was Pachydiskis newburgensis. So ammonites are relatives of octopus and squid. They live in these spiral, or they lived in these spiral shells. They're all extinct now. But this ammonite, Pachydiskis newburgensis, only lived in the very last epoch of the Cretaceous called. You're gonna have to pronounce it for me. I'm gonna put it here in our personal chat, Peter. Can you pronounce this for me, please? Because I think you'll do better.
Maastrichtan. Maastrichtan?
Maastrichtan?
Yes. So
Okay.
Maastricht is a city in the south of the Netherlands, and it is.
That's where I had you pronounce it.
Yes, and so this is an area where we used to have a lot of coal mines. In those coal mines are where we found a lot of fossils. I think a very famous one was one of the first ichthyosaurs. I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah.
But so that is where we get this term from, because those were some of the earliest finds of completely new species, and that's why they named it after the city in the Netherlands called Maastricht.
Absolutely. So the Maastrichtan is the very last epoch of the Cretaceous, the very, very last one. And only in rocks which are of Maastrichtan age and no other age, not Turonian, not Cenomanian, not any period after, like the Paleocene in the Cenozoic, only in rocks of Maastrichtan age is the ammonite Pachydiskis newburgensis.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what that means is this ammonite lived in a time when there was a very particular oceanic temperature and composition, and then as soon as that changed, they went extinct because ammonites went extinct at the end of the Cretaceous. But for other periods, it was when the atmosphere or the ocean chemistry slightly changed that caused them to adapt, and then in the next epoch, you would see that the index fossil is slightly different than the one preceding it. Not a whole lot different, but slightly different. And that can actually lead to problems among paleontologists as to figuring out whether or not this counts as the same index fossil in the preceding layer because of how similar they are, or does it count as a separate species? That happens, which you wouldn't expect if the record weren't millions of years old and evolution were true. But anyways, so for index fossils, there are lots of different index fossils. There are ammonites, there are conodonts, foraminifera, radiolarians, coccolithophores. Index fossil just means it is a fossil diagnostic of a particular time period. That's all that means, really. And so the thing about the dating of it, so researchers, or naturalists, as they used to be called, the scientists, naturalists knew about the existence of index fossils before they knew the ages of rocks. So, Dutch naturalists were out there finding Pachydiskis newburgensis and other index fossils, but they didn't know how old it was. All they knew was that, hey, we find this ammonite just in this one particular rock, but none of the other ones above or below it. That's what they knew.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until 1920s or 30s, I think, that radiometric dating first started to become a thing. And then only after radiometric dating became a thing could researchers actually assign ages to these rocks. The index fossils just told them, is this rock above or below another rock with a different type of index fossil? Yeah. And so if you are in the Netherlands and you find the ammonite I've been talking about, but you're always going to find it below, Paleocene specific forams, always, without exception. And that's true. Doesn't matter if you go to the Netherlands or you go to, I don't know, Utah, or you go to Nigeria or wherever. You're always going to find that pattern wherever you go. That's what the index fossils were telling them. And so then the dating systems came along, and researchers figured out, oh, hey, Pachydiskis newburgensis terminates at 66 million years ago. Now, what the creationists think is the actual fossils were the ones giving the dates, but they aren't. It's the radiometric dating methods which are giving the dates. Those are telling us how old the sediments are.
Yes.
You can't tell how old the rock is by the fossil.
The fossil
you have
only
to have the radio.
Yeah, the fossil only indicates the specific layer, and it will be found, as you said, on several different places around the Earth where that particular layer is exposed. And it's almost as if there is some kind of a column. Just
right, it's almost like that's a thing.
And let's toy a little bit with Kent Hovind again. Yes, you can see the entire column. There are at least 7 places on the globe where you can see the entire column. So yes, it's a thing.
Well, I mean, you can see most of it. I mean, you have to be standing on something, but you can see a lot of it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So index fossils do not tell you how old it is. They only tell you, what layer it is. You have to get that dating from the actual radiometric dating methods. Now, if you want to argue the systems are wrong, good luck, first of all, because all the researchers agree that they work, all the chemists and physicists that work on it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a different argument than saying that the fossils are used to date the rocks. That's not how that works.
No.
The other thing, it mentioned, so funny enough, I actually have this book, Genetics, Paleontology, and Evolution, and I've read a couple. It's like an anthology work. It's just a bunch of different essays by different biologists and paleontologists, but also it's from the 50s. So again, not exactly new material. And so again, and this quote by Alfred Romer down here is sort of the same thing that Simpson was talking about with the punctuated equilibrium. You have rapid rates of evolution. Also, fun story about Alfred Romer. So there was a period of time in the early Carboniferous which was called Romer's Gap. Now, really late Devonian to early Carboniferous. And Romer's Gap was basically the lack of amphibian fossils in the late Devonian to early Carboniferous. So we had Panderichthyes and Eusthenopteron and Ichthyostega, but then there was kind of nothing for a while, and then we have full-fledged amphibians, or tetrapods, really, to be more cladistically accurate. They're different clades of tetrapods that were amphibious. But the thing is, guess what? Romer's Gap has been filled. We've found a whole bunch of late Devonian and early Carboniferous tetrapods. Who would have thunk it? What a crazy world we live in.
Yes.
Who could have possibly seen that coming?
Yeah, it's as if evidence keeps coming in. So weird.
Exactly. Yeah, I know. It's bonkers. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
We ready for the next section?
Yes, definitely. Let's do.
Alrighty. Quote, concerning this matter of links, Professor Darcy Thompson, or D.R.C. Thompson, once said in his book On Growth and Form, quote, 80 years study of Darwinian evolution has not taught us how birds descended from reptiles, mammals from earlier quadrupeds from fishes, nor vertebrates from the invertebrate stock. The invertebrates themselves involve the self-same difficulties. the breach between vertebrate and invertebrate, worm and coelenterate, coelenterate and protozoan is so wide that we cannot see across the intervening gap at all. We cross a boundary every time we pass from family to family or group to group. A principle of discontinuity, then, is inherent in all our classifications. To seek for stepping stones across the gaps between them is to seek in vain forever. Close quote. The same facts confront us in regard to plant life. Dr. Herbert Nilsson, professor of botany from the University of Lund, Sweden, said in his book Synthetic Speciation, quote, if we look at the peculiar main groups of the fossil flora, it is quite striking that at definite intervals of geological time, they are all at once and quite suddenly there, and moreover in full bloom in all their manifold forms, and it is quite as surprising that after a time which is to be measured not only in millions, but in tens of millions of years, they disappear equally suddenly. Furthermore, at the end of their existence, they do not change into forms which are transitional towards the main types of the next period. Such are entirely lacking. Close quote. Okay. So on growth and form, I think Darcy Thompson was one of the guys who was interested in like structuralism, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong, but regardless, he's just wrong here. And again, it's not his fault. He was in the early 1900s, so most of these fossils we didn't have. So I can't really blame him. How birds descended from reptiles. Dapper and I talked about that at great length in our Mesozoic section. In like the last episode of the Mesozoic section, we talked about how there are, you have theropods, and then within theropods you have coelurosaurs, and then maniraptorans, and then the paraves, where you basically have a bunch of different theropod dinosaurs which are all so similar to each other and so similar to early birds that there's a huge amount of contention as to who's actually more closely related to birds than to other dinosaurs. And so you have paleontologists getting into fistfights, like, are dromaeosaurs more closely related to birds? Is it anchiornithids which are more closely related, or troodontids, or whoever? It's really, or Scansoriopterigids in some recent systems. It's really difficult to figure out who's the actual closest bird relative because they're all so similar to birds.
Yep.
They all have feathers. They all have similar hand structures, similar body proportions and all that sort of stuff, similar teeth, because yes, the early birds do have teeth, but no modern birds have teeth. And so it gets really difficult to figure out which of these are convergences, which of these are plesiomorphies. So that's just wrong. And again, not his fault. Most of the fossils that show us that birds are descended from theropod dinosaurs were found since the 90s, basically. Because you had researchers digging in China and they found Sinornithosaurus and Microraptor and all those guys. That was in the 90s when that started happening. And we found a whole bunch more since, because now we know where to look.
Yeah.
We know where to go
and
to find.
I think Aaron Rock coined the phrase that the moment you have creationists fighting over fossils and saying, okay, this is a bird and that is a dinosaur, and the other one says, no, that's a dinosaur, this is a bird. Now you got a transitional fossil. And they do the exact same thing with early human fossils, because this is an ape. Yep. There's a famous debate that Kent Hovind did, and I keep forgetting the guy's name. A brilliant university professor who actually brought the skulls to the debate and said, well, Mr. Hovind, you've got 4 books in your store. One book says that this is fully ape and this is fully human. Another book says this is fully ape and that is fully human. Then we have another book that says, so they had every single composition of the fossils, and I think it was more than 2 even, I think it was 4. But they had every single composition of what was an ape and what was a human across all those books. And all those books were sold in Kent Hovind's Creation bookstore. And he said, so who's right? Because they can't all be right. And this is why
Right,
we
of
know
course.
that these are transitional fossils, because the people in your book just completely describe it. They can't
Right.
figure it out.
There's
So,
a famous chart which was originally on Talk Origins, but RJ and I also incorporated it into Rocks, which has exactly that. It has like the same creationists will sometimes score the exact same fossils as either ape or human, depending on when they look at it. Like Dwayne Gish did that for the famous skull cap of Homo erectus. At one point, he said it was 100% human, and then later he said it was 100% ape. So David Minton, who passed actually this year due to COVID, is from AIG, and he said Archaeopteryx and I believe it was Chenioraptor were identical. Now, Chenioraptor is a dromaeosaur. It's in the same group as Velociraptor. So if he's saying Archaeopteryx, which is a bird, is identical to a dromaeosaur, that means Velociraptor and Deinonychus and Utahraptor are birds by his classification scheme.
mm-hmm.
That's what that means.
Yeah.
It's hilarious. And at the same time, you have Bodhi Hodge running around going, they're just perching birds. Like saying Archaeopteryx is just a perching bird. So it's like, these guys have no idea what they're doing. None of them are paleontologists. They have no idea how to look at fossils and score characters and all this sort of stuff. And so they come up with hilariously mismatching systems, right? Because no one can agree. Because it has to be 100% this or this. It can't be transitional. They don't allow that.
Mm-hmm.
It's just immensely funny.
I just looked it up. So it is Kent Hovind versus Ben Wagner. So if you haven't seen that debate, you need to go watch that. They're pretty much, I think, when it comes to Hovind, two debates that everyone has to watch. And that is this one, Hovind versus Ben Wagner, and the one that he did with our dearly departed friend, Bill Ludlow. That's where you can see...
I would also throw in... yes, I agree with both of those. I think also the one that he did with Aaron and the one he did with RJ would also be ones you should throw in. Oh, and if you're looking for a very brutal Kent Hovind debate, the one he had with Professor Dave is absolutely brutal. So
yes. And so I point these out because these two debates go... they go into a specific line of fossils that we have discovered, and they point out that he has literally no answers, is dodging, diving to just get away from the question, doing everything not to answer the question that he's been asked. And these two people were really, really cordial. And Ben Wagner has a sense of humor that I absolutely love. At some point, he bursts out crying on stage and converts to Christianity. Not really, but part of his it's just an amazing debate. One of the people that I need to talk to at some point in my lifetime, someone that I really admire because of his debate style. It was absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Also, I want to highlight Hive Science, who says we need to coin the term a fiducian claim, for when YECs cite a professional without understanding the implications of their claim. Yes, absolutely. I agree with that. So for anybody who doesn't know, Alan Fiducia is a paleoornithologist. Actually, we talked about him last time with PZ. The thing that Fiducia says, which is contra like the whole entirety of like theropod paleontology, is he basically says anything that has fossils is a bird, which is a problem because a bunch of theropod dinosaurs, and now apparently pterosaurs and some like ceratopsians also had very primitive feathers, so that's kind of a problem. But anyways, he says if it has feathers, it's a bird, not a dinosaur. So the problem is there are tyrannosaurs that have feathers, which could definitely not fly. Now, there are ceratopsians who had very primitive feathers, they're type 1 feathers basically, which is just like a what do you call it? It had like an epithelial what's the term for it? Papilla. There we go. So not a true feather. It's just sort of a little. It looks like a little sort of projection coming out of the epidermis. But basically, Fiducia's claim, the creationists claim that birds are not related to dinosaurs at all. And he makes this whole argument that birds are actually sister to dinosaurs. They don't nest within dinosaurs. And so instead of birds being within dinosaurs, the dinosaurs that have feathers are birds that evolved to look like dinosaurs. So Velociraptor isn't a dinosaur, it's a bird that became flightless and convergently looks like a dinosaur. And creationists will cite Fiducia saying, oh, look, he said birds aren't dinosaurs. Well, yeah, but he also said Velociraptor is a bird. Why aren't you siding with him on that too? Because they don't read Fiducia. They don't know what he actually said. They just know the one little snippet, which is very sad because Fiducia is an actual paleoornithologist. So it's very sad that he's making that claim at all, and nobody really cites him anymore because he's just bonkers.
It is as if quote mining is a thing when it comes to people denying science. And
it's that's true. Monkey for Banana says, Professor Dave said, you didn't teach biology for 15 years. You lied to children in a church. That's not teaching biology. That's in reference to the Professor Dave debate with Kent Hovind. Like I said, it was brutal. He actually, when Professor Dave uploaded it on his own channel, he started it with an apology video because he's not usually that mean to people, which I thought was very funny. But anyways, what was the other thing? How mammals descended from earlier quadrupeds. Again, note we have the transition from reptiles to mammals that spans like 100 million years, and we have fossils out the wazoo on that. If you don't believe me, R.J. Downard wrote this book titled Evolution Slam Dunk, where he goes into it.
I was just about to mention it. If you have doubts about the reptile-mammal transition, contact R.J. It probably, in our little part of the YouTubes, he's probably the one that is most informed and can tell you most about it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, so there are whole books on the reptile-mammal transition, so nope, not an argument. Quadrupeds from fish, again, we've talked about Tiktaalik and the fish to tetrapod transition numerous times in this series already because they keep bringing it up. So again, wrong. Vertebrates from invertebrates. So this one's kind of interesting because there are a whole bunch of like weird invertebrate deuterostomes sort of around the base of the deuterostome tree, and it's not quite clear how many of them are closely related to vertebrates, which again, you probably expect under evolution. You see a bunch of transitional forms, and it's hard to place them. It's again expected on evolution, not really on creationism. We also say the invertebrates themselves. No, we've talked about that before. We have evidence of like the transitions like among invertebrates. So like there are these guys called the xenocoelomorph flatworms. Their phylum is Xenocoelomorpha. So basically these are worms which are at the very base of the bilaterian tree. They don't have nephrons like all other bilaterally symmetrical animals. They don't have those same features. And so we do have an idea of the transition from these guys to other more derived bilaterians. So again, that's just wrong. Coelenterate and protozoans. Actually, that's really interesting, and we haven't really talked about it because most people don't talk about other eukaryotes. So like choanoflagellates are a thing, and what's really cool about them is they will actually group together and form these multicellular structures which can bend as a unit. So they bend like a tissue. but they're individuals. Ooh, so that's kind of cool. Um, they we've learned a lot in recent years about how choanoflagellates work. They actually have a lot of the same proteins and genes that animals have, which again makes sense. They're the closest relatives of animals.
Mm-hmm.
So again, that's just wrong. Um, if you look at and then he talks about plants, which is just everything he says is wrong here. I don't know who this guy Herbert Nielsen is, but again, he was living a long time ago, so maybe in his time they didn't have a lot of fossils, but today we do. So when he says the main groups of fossil flora, they appear all at once. I don't even think that was true when he was writing this, because first of all, ferns have been around since the Devonian or late Silurian, I think one of those. But that's long before angiosperms, and we find the first bryophytes, which are non-vascular plants, before we find the first ferns. So I don't think so. That wasn't right. I don't think even in his own day. It is true nobody knew where flowers came from for a long time, and even today, even though we have fossils which are helping to fill in the gaps, there's still a lot we don't understand about the evolution of flowers, where they came from, etc. But we're getting there. It's on the road. So we have groups like the Bennettitales, the Gigantoteriales, which are flower-like, but they're not close to flowers. So they're stem angiosperms, but they're kind of farther down or further down. We don't have a whole lot of like sister groups to the angiosperms out right now. But keep searching, right? I mean, just earlier this year, a Jurassic angiosperm was found, which was predicted, sorry. So yeah, that's not true. We also have had some transitional plants for a very long time, like Cooksonia, which is a transitional vascular plant. It shows features intermediate between the non-vascular plants and the vascular plants, which again, expected. Its gametophyte generation was not quite as long as it is for the non-vascular plant, so it's starting to develop more of a sporophyte generation than its ancestors, but not quite as much of a sporophyte generation as its descendants. That makes it transitional. Whoa, who would have thunk it? They disappear equally suddenly. I'm not sure what he means by that. All the major groups of plants are still around, so I'm not entirely sure what he means by they disappear. Of course, this is, again, a quote mine. They're just pulling this one sentence out of presumably a whole context. So I don't know what specific groups of plants he's referring to. So anyway.
Can I say it's also a sad thing that that is one of the things that I find missing when you go to YouTube. There are lots of channels that talk about evolution. They all talk about the evolution of animals because obviously humans are more interested in animals, and I mean, why not? Yeah. If you have the dinosaurs, which are fascinating, so I get it that the common interest goes out to animals more than plants, but I would really like to see someone pick that up, and because as we know, a lot of the creationists get their science from YouTube because that's where you go when you need science. So we should at least have someone cover all of that as well, so that we can point them there and say, okay, you want to do some YouTube science, go over there and go watch that. I mean, it's
absolutely.
when I what I do mostly is talk to people that have a certain religion, and I want to know why they believe what they believe, and you don't find a lot of people that say, okay, I'm going to I read this book and I read this book. They all watch videos and they point to certain people who have a yes. strong online presence. So yeah, it's something that I use a lot. I point people to this channel, for instance, for a lot of things.
Well, I appreciate it.
Yeah, so most the video that I promote most is probably the Italian wall lizard, because people say, well, animals can't grow new things because the information has to be there, and if it's not there, they can't grow it. Well, yeah, sorry. Have you seen this one?
Here's the thing.
Yeah.
It's the cool thing about it is the thing that I think is funny is like the Italian wall lizard example where it developed cecal valves. That's non-genetic,
Mm-hmm.
right? It developed a structure as a result of being placed in a new environment that didn't even involve genes,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's,
It earned
I
me
mean,
it earned me a block less
creationists are.
it earned me a block less than 24 hours ago.
Well, I'm
I'm,
glad I can
I'm,
help get you blocked, Peter.
I'm not I'm not
I strive
kidding.
for it.
I'm not kidding. This guy said it's impossible, and I said, okay, here's the link. Go look. Block.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there are also other instances like there's this thing called cyclomorphosis. So basically, the environment causes species to develop a particular species to develop differently based on the time of year that the offspring are born. So, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, then there's like epigenetics and all that, other sort of stuff, which is causing where organisms, are developing differently in certain ways, but it's not even a result of the actual genes themselves changing, right? So there's a whole all the arguments about, oh, you need information. No, you don't. You don't need new genes or mutations necessarily. Now, of course, generally when we talk about evolution, we talk about mutations in particular genes. We talk about duplications and transpositions and all that sort of stuff. But you don't always need that for novel things, right? So, anyway.
Which reminds me, um, I think I'm going to make a new request for a video
Okay.
because it is Pride Month. And
It is, yes.
completely in line with Pride Month, there's another thing that I bring up every once in a while, which is something that I don't think anyone has covered in a good way for people to go watch. Can you do a video about the lesbian lizards, please?
Okay, so here's the thing. I actually talked to a guy who is an expert on Aspidoscelis uniparens, and he said they don't actually do the thing where one gets the other to clone itself.
But don't they still have kind of a mating ritual?
No, that's the thing. They don't. He thinks that there's like that the sort of rumor of that got started because they were in some researcher put down that they seem to have been doing that, but it appears more that they were essentially just kind of exploring their terrarium or environment, and it only looked like they were doing that, but they weren't actually. Because I asked the guy who's actually at LSUS, the school where I TA, and one of the guys there is a herpetologist, or was, I don't know, and so that was his field, was these lizards which are like polyploid. And so I asked him about that, and he's not convinced about it. I personally haven't done the research, but he's heard that claim and doesn't really seem convinced by it. So that's just what I've heard. I'm just saying what he told me. So I could be wrong, or he could be wrong, but that's just what he told me.
Yeah. So, and this is I don't know. So from what I've heard and where I've looked into it, it seems that they have some kind of mating ritual still. I'm not
That could
sure
be possible.
if that is now
could be
overturned, but
I don't know. Like I'm not an expert on these guys.
No. But you do some neat research.
So I did do a video in the same sort of vein, Peter, where I did talk about how homosexuality is a very natural phenomenon in the bonobo's tail.
Mm-hmm.
So if anybody wants to argue that homosexuality is not natural, they can see the bonobo's tail and understand that it is very natural. Actually, like most mammals have been observed displaying homosexual tendencies. So
Yeah.
I really wouldn't be surprised if there are lizards who also do that. That wouldn't surprise me because we know it's already so widespread. It not only in mammals but in some birds too. Like I believe parrots and penguins have also paired up uh, uh, single sex. So yeah,
Hmm.
that wouldn't surprise me really.
Okay.
But at any rate, um, alrighty, all right. Let's finish out this next page. Oh,
Okay.
we're almost to the end of the chapter. Ha ha. How about that? Okay. Quote, not only are there no transitional forms between major groups of animals and plants in the fossil record, but there are no transitional forms among major groups of living plants and animals today. Professor Dobzhansky, famous evolutionist from Columbia University, in his book Genetics and the Origin of Species, declared, quote, if we assemble as many individuals living at a given time as we can, we notice at once that the observed variation does not form any kind of continuous distribution. Instead, a multitude of separate, discrete distributions are found. The living world is not a single array in which any two variants are connected by unbroken series of intergrades, but an array of more or less distinctly separate arrays, intermediates between which are absent or at least rare. Close quote. Among man's supposedly closest relatives, the ape family, there are no living transitional stages to man, nor can there be seen living transitional steps to the apes, nor can even the ape's supposed evolutionary ancestors be found in the fossil record. The book, The Primates, said in 1965, quote, unfortunately, the fossil record which would enable us to trace the emergence of apes is still hopelessly incomplete. We do not know either when or where distinctly ape-like animals first began to diverge from monkey stock. Close quote. However, some persons claim that at least the horse provides a classic example in the fossil record of transitional stages upward. Evolutionists begin with Eohippus, a small fox-like animal, and place it after a series of progressively larger fossils up to the modern horse. The actual fact is that not even in one place is this order found in the fossil record. Two or even three horse types may occur in the same formation. Some are found at widely separate localities. Okay, I have very many problems with what we just read. I know, big shock. But anyways. Okay, so there are definite quote mines going on here. So the first quote mine, the very obvious quote mine, is what Dobzhansky is saying. So what Dobzhansky is referring to is correct. This quote is correct. You don't see in nature every species being connected to another by innumerable intermediates. You don't. You see species, you have speciation events where you have a population which goes off and becomes its own separate species. And typically, you don't have a series of intermediate populations between that new species and the original species, right? Typically, that's not how that works.
Hmm.
But that's not how it always works. There are examples where you can find a whole bunch of intermediate populations, like, I don't know, maybe we'll call them ring species. And I'm just now, Peter, I'm just spitballing here. What if there were like a salamander in California that, let's say hypothetically it like speciated around the Death Valley. Now, just hypothetically, of course, this isn't. I'm not saying anything real. It's just hypothetical.
Hmm.
But what if it came from Oregon, and it traveled southward, and let's call it Insatina ex Schultze, say, and it went in two directions around the Death Valley, and then at the other end, when it came out, the two populations which went their separate ways around could not interbreed anymore. Now, hypothetically, the hypothetical, there's no way this is real. There's no way Insatina ex Schultze is a salamander that actually exists in California. But if that were the case, would you say that satisfies our criterion of having a bunch of continuous populations forming a species?
Hmm. Yeah, and the common
Yeah.
thing to say is, but they're still there's the same that they're still lizard. These are lizards, right? So And Kent Hovind does that with
Right, they're still just salamanders.
salamanders. Yeah. So Hovind does that with the squirrels, the Kaobab squirrel, and I think the other one is the
Yeah.
Abert squirrel, separated
Okay.
by the Grand Canyon. Yeah,
Right.
there's still a squirrel. Yeah, but so you keep saying that when your Bible says they bring forth after their kind. If they can't bring forth, they're a different kind. So now we've got two kinds of squirrels and two kinds of salamanders, or maybe even more kinds of salamanders. We have to figure out
Right.
where along the way they can actually still interbreed and where it stops. So, and to me, that is the dishonesty, because that's shifting the goalposts. If your Bible makes a claim that all animals bring forth after their kind, that means that if they cannot bring forth, they are a different kind. But that gets us
Right.
into trouble
Exactly.
with the whole ark story, because if that were true, then they would have needed a lot more animals on the ark, and that wouldn't fit. And so they have to move the goalpost and say, okay, but this is still a squirrel. This is still a salamander. They have to be this dishonest in order to keep their story alive. And
Right.
to me, it's mind-boggling if you have to lie to yourself in order to keep believing a story you know is not true. I don't see why you would do that. But
Well, right. I mean,
so there
you and
was
I don't see a reason.
there was a recent poll, and at the moment, more than 50% of U.S. citizens actually accept evolution, which is
Nice.
taking it in the right direction.
That is a good thing. Yeah,
It
absolutely.
is,
Um. So
and I like to think that
yeah,
that
I
I like to think that young Earth creationism is making a major contribution to this. Because people will see,
right.
well, what you're saying just doesn't add up. So we'll look to what the other side has to say, and then they start accepting evolution. I think
Right.
young
I
Earth
mean,
creationism is going to be the nail in the coffin when it comes to certain religions. We'll have to wait and see.
no, I agree. I think, and the funny thing is, I think there are certain like theologians who say the same thing. They're like, we have to get rid of young Earth creationism. It's taking people away. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
Yeah.
it's because a lot of times when people get out of a fundamentalist group or one extreme, they jump to the opposite extreme. So if they're creationist and they get out, they're not going to slide. A lot of times, they're not going to slide to just a milder form of Christianity. They're going to jump all the way to atheism, and we've seen that time and time again
Mm-hmm.
with lots of people in this very community.
Yeah.
That happens a lot.
Yes.
It doesn't necessarily have to happen. There's no conflict broadly, as we've talked about, between like Christianity and evolution, and that's fine. But the thing is, there are these people, like these young Earth creationists, are causing people to jump from one extreme to the complete opposite. And the Christian theologians who are more liberal, see that. They see that that's happening, and they're like, no, this has to stop. We have to,
Yeah.
keep this from happening. So, um, so anyways, um, let's see. Trying to think. So yeah. So again, Dobzhansky's right. Most species don't integrate into each other, but that's not a problem for evolution. That's how speciation typically works. So I'm not really. That doesn't surprise me. Um. Okay, this is the part I want to really dig into. Among man's supposed closest relatives, the ape family, there are no living transitional stages to man. What does that mean? What does that mean? Aren't chimpanzees? I mean, they're more closely related to us than they are to gorillas. So don't they count as a transition? I mean,
And, the thing is, there are no living transitional species. Probably.
Everything is transitional.
Yeah, because everything is, first of all, that is correct. But if a certain population becomes the dominant population, the previous one might die out. So yeah,
Right.
it's
Exactly.
very likely that there would be, even seeing how we have conquered the planet, because we have done something that no other animal has done. We're not adapting to the environment anymore. We're adapting the environment to fit us.
Right.
That is why we might be I'm going to say it, evolving slower, because there's no need for new adaptations,
well, there's
other than,
lower selective pressure on us.
yes, other than a few massive diseases. So we have had
Right.
AIDS, so we do have humans that have evolved the ability that they no longer can get AIDS. So
Yeah, and the interesting thing about that was the actual mutation which causes resistance to AIDS evolved, or the mutation was caused as a result of the bubonic plague, funny enough. The mutation which conferred resistance to the bubonic plague provided the foundation for resistance to AIDS. It's really wild. I can't remember. It's like I think it's CCR5 Delta 32 is the gene involved. I'll put that in the side chat so you guys can look it up and correct me.
another thing,
CCR5.
Hard Science has been looking for papers concerning the lizard I mentioned. I have put both links into your Twitter DM as well.
Did they find a paper that confirms it?
The first one was pretty old. I haven't looked at the second one. But the second one says evolutionary changes in dopaminergic modulation of courtship behavior in I can speak just like Kent Hovind. Whiptail lizards. So
and Nimidophorus whiptail lizards. Let's see. However, while the anatomical distribution of the dopamine synthesizing enzyme tyrosine hydroxylase are similar among vertebrates, evolutionary changes in the functional role of dopamine are poorly understood. We tested whether a dopamine D1 receptor antagonist would facilitate the display of courtship and copulatory behaviors. 2001, that's pretty recent. No, it's not terribly antiquated. Facilitate the display of courtship and copulatory behaviors in two related nimidophorine lizards. Nimidophorus lizards offer unique systems to the evolutionary changes in functionality because ancestral and descendant species can be studied in parallel. Nimidophorus uniparens is an all-female parthenogenetic species and is the triploid descendant of the sexual and diploid species C. inornatus. Here we report that castrated male C. inornatus and overreactomized C. uniparens, a dopamine D1 antagonist, increased the proportion of individuals mounting and decreased the latency to mount. Moreover, there was a species difference in sensitivity to the agonist. Mounting was elicited at a lower dose in C. uniparens and in C. inornatus. One possible explanation for this heightened sensitivity in the triploid parthenogen is that by virtue of the increased ploidy, the parthenogen's elevated levels of D1 receptor. Okay, so they're saying that this dopamine agonist increased the proportion of individuals who perform mounting behavior. Okay, interesting. Thank you, Hive Science. We appreciate you and everything that you do.
This is why I love the community. You just throw something out there, and someone is going to dig into it. And we all benefit from it.
That's true, and that's why we love them.
Yes.
That's exactly. We do. We all benefit from it.
Every once in a while, we get people.
Somebody said.
Yeah.
Somebody named Skystar 1221 said 2001 is recent. Anyone born in 2001 can drink. Well, I mean that's still fairly recent. So anyway,
Yeah, we have to keep in mind
okay.
we have a limited amount of scientists, so probably not
That's true. We
everything
do.
will get as much attention as anything else. So yeah.
Things that are medically related get disproportionate attention compared to things which are investigated for the sake of investigation.
Mm-hmm.
That is the case.
Yep.
So you're always going to find if it's a nematode that causes some kind of disease in humans, you know, doctors are all over it. But if it's a nematode that lives in the gut of a polar bear, nobody really cares,
Mm-hmm.
right? Maybe one team somewhere is studying it, right? So that's just how it is. That's the nature of research. We have a limited amount of money and manpower, so it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, also, we're not descended from anything else alive today, right? Or as a species, we are not descended from any other modern species. That's again a complete misunderstanding of how evolution works.
Can we say
If
it?
there were any,
Can we say it in their language? We did not come from chimpanzees.
we did not come from chimpanzees. We did not come from gorillas. There are no modern apes or monkeys that we are evolved from.
Nope.
If there were any Australopithecines alive today, we would not have descended from that species of Australopith, from that extant species. We were descended from a common ancestor with that species of Australopith. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, they'd be saying, it's not human. Although, actually, you know, I've been thinking about this. Richard Dawkins says it in Science and the Soul. How interesting would like animal rights be if Australopiths were still alive? That'd be a very interesting debate. You know,
Yeah.
because I mean we're already like, you know, chimpanzees and gorillas are protected by law, and same with orangutans and gibbons. But like, you know, if Australopiths were still around or Homo erectus or something, you know, how close would we be to like integrating them into certain societies, right? I think that'd be very interesting to find out. But
So
anyways,
in some places in India, and I forgot the exact species, we do have a certain kind of primate who can actually form gangs. They will rob stores. They will have I'm just going to call them people because it's people behavior. They will have people who are
yeah,
on the outside looking out, so for whenever danger is going to come in. The other ones go in and raid the entire store. Then there are some that will prepare the escape route. So we've got a very organized gang robbing
yes,
stores.
absolutely, right.
Don't
Yeah, absolutely.
pretend that we're the only ones with a brain. These guys have figured it out to empty your store and to go home with some nice food.
I mean, there are like different primates that will adopt like puppies and kittens.
Mm-hmm. That too.
You know, the was it the Hamadryas monkeys will like bathe in the geothermal like baths in Japan because they know, hey, hot water over here. It's cold outside. Let's go, everybody, get in the hot tub.
Yeah.
You know, and but chimps are in their stone age currently.
Yes.
Like they're using stone tools right now. They are in their stone age. So it's ridiculous to talk about to talk as though there's just nothing between us. We did a video on this channel recently, the orangutan's tale, where we talked about medicine usage in other primates. Lemurs will chew and swallow certain millipedes to control infections. They'll also rub parts of it on, or well, orangutans will rub certain plants on their body to control infections. Chimps and gorillas also swallow certain leaves for nematodes. Medicine usage extent even certain bees. Bees will actually pick flowers when there are microsporidian infections. They will pick certain flowers that have more antibiotic compounds than what they normally get if they detect these infections. So medicine is very widespread throughout animals, whether you want to call it I mean, I would say it's medicine. I would say picking certain flowers to control parasites is medicine, right?
Yes.
I would say that. So, these are by no means human unique behaviors. These are all over the place. What else? What else did he say? There are no transitional. It says nor can even the apes' supposed evolutionary ancestors be seen in the fossil record. Okay, so at this point in the series we're doing on this channel, The Ancestor's Tale, we are 13 episodes in, and the whole series so far has been on apes. Just apes. So we've talked about the fossil record of humans, like earlier Homo, Australopiths. We've talked about the orangutan's tail covered a huge swath of fossil primates like Lufangpithecus and Cevapithecus and Gigantopithecus, all sorts of orangutan fossil relatives. And then you also have like the Dryopithecines. You have lots and lots of Dryopiths. And then you have even more primitive than that. You have like Proconsul and Akembo and Morotopithecus and Afropithecus. You have apes, which are a lot like monkeys, but they're just barely on the ape side because they don't have tails. Right? And then on the opposite side of that divide, you have monkeys, which are ape-like, like Egyptopithecus, right? So we've got both the ape-like monkeys and the monkey-like apes, which again, exactly what you expect on evolution. I've been bowled over, honestly, by how many ape fossils we have. It actually surprised me that we have as many ape fossils as we do that just never get talked about. They simply are not discussed. I don't think about them usually because creationists never bring them up. No creationists ever talk about like Proconsul and Akembo and those other guys I mentioned, or the Dryopiths. They don't ever get brought up. They don't talk about fossil orangutans. They only talk about fossil humans, and they only talk about a handful of fossil humans. It's incredibly dishonest. Yeah, chimps wage war, definitely.
Brian Stevens makes a good point. He says the only thing that separates us from the animals is greed. While it can be evidenced in individual animals, it's not considered acceptable social behavior. Yeah. There's that.
Yeah, Mary Ann the Night Owl says, I think I read recently about a band of chimps that went to war with a band of gorillas. Yeah, chimps patrol certain regions, the sort of like little nascent, villages or whatever. They have their area that they claim as their own, and any other monkeys or chimps or gorillas who come close, they fight them off.
Mm-hmm.
They do. They're like, this is our land, which again, that's relatively human behavior, wouldn't you say?
Yes. And it's natural behavior because it is all about survival. And if you're going to defend your patch of land, because that is where you can survive, yeah, that is to be expected. Not just humans do that; animals do that. And the good thing is that they're now, as we said, they are in the Stone Age, so they might come up with some weapons. Which I'm hoping that will be a rapid evolution. I want to see poachers getting killed by bands of chimps. That would be fun to watch. I'm sorry, but like I just love animals more.
Roaming in the jungle.
Yeah, I love animals more than I love humans most of the time. So
no, I agree. It's always tastefully ironic whenever poachers get eaten by lions or trampled by elephants or things like that. Mm-hmm. I always appreciate those sorts of stories.
Yes.
The last thing, I guess, we'll finish off with this because we're coming up close to the 2-hour mark. Is it says evolutionists begin with Eohippus, a small fox-like animal, and place after it. I got that backwards. A series of progressively larger fossils leading up to the modern horse. And it says this order isn't found in one place in the fossil record, and that multiple horse types can overlap. Well, duh. Obviously. This is like weird. It's arguing that like because orthogenesis isn't true, therefore horse evolution didn't happen, which is really weird. Basically, so Hyracotherium, or Eohippus, whatever you want to call it, is not the actual direct ancestor of modern horses. So Hyracotherium is a member of a clade of a family called Paleotheridae, which is the sister group to Equidae, the horse family. The thing is, though, these guys are super duper similar to horses, except for the fact that they're a lot smaller and they have 5 toes instead of 1, and they have a slightly different tooth structure, but it's very, very similar. As we mentioned, as Dapper and I mentioned in I think a couple different shows, the differences between the earliest horses and rhinos is literally just the cusps of their molars. You have to be an expert in fossil hoof mammal tooth anatomy to tell the difference between a fossil horse and a fossil rhino at the very, very earliest stages. That's how hard it is.
It's just as if it's a gradual thing, evolution, right? Very gradual.
Almost. And so the other thing about that is, so one, Eohippus is not directly ancestral. It is a representation of what the direct ancestor of the horse would have looked like at that time. So that's for one thing. Second, of course, it's not all found in one place. Horses started in North America, but spread out into Asia and then Europe and Africa. They spread all across the world, and also in South America. So, of course, there's no single place where you can see the whole transition from Hyracotherium to modern Equus. That's just, no, absolutely not. Which, again, isn't an argument. But also saying you can find 2 or 3 horse types, which I guess means species, occurring in the same formation. Again, yeah, evolution's a tree.
Yeah,
it's like a bush. It's not a straight line, and that's what I meant by orthogenesis. Orthogenesis is basically evolution proceeds in a straight line, and fossil species are directly ancestral to each other. So it's like Hyracotherium is the direct ancestor of Myohippus, which is the direct ancestor of Pliohippus and then Equus. That's very unlikely. It's very, very unlikely. What is more likely is all those taxa are what the ancestors of modern horses would have looked like at those times. These are side branches, right? They're not the direct ancestors. We don't expect to find direct ancestors in the fossil record because of how spotty the fossil record is.
Mm-hmm.
And so by saying that you can find 2 or 3 species together, okay, like lots of genera have dozens of species alive today all at the same time. Why is that a problem? I don't get it.
Yeah.
And what do you want?
It would be the same. This is explained with ring species. If a certain species moves away, that doesn't mean that the original species immediately dies out.
Right.
They can live next to each other, where one just gets further and further away from the original species because they move into a different environment and have different selective pressures put on them. This is not rocket science. This is what you can observe right now, today. So why are they putting this forward as some kind of a gotcha to disprove evolution? Because now we've got all these species living simultaneously. Yeah, that's how it works. That's what evolution predicts can happen. So what's your point?
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's kind of funny because it's like they learn how evolution works and then they use it as a gotcha against evolution, and it's like, what? Yeah. Why do you think it's a gotcha? This is just how it works.
So and my hypothesis on that is because their target demographic are people who do not know what evolution is, and get fed the straw man evolution that creationists have come up with. So now, if you have a real fact coming from evolution, that will go against their straw man version of evolution. So that's where the gotcha moment comes in. Because it doesn't fit their straw man. No, it doesn't. Because it doesn't exist. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's like the well, you believe you came from a rock. Well, no. See, even they don't believe they came from rocks. Like, well, yeah, we never claimed that in the first place.
No. You know what? You know what comes from rock? Dirt. What was made out of dirt? I forgot. Someone made something out of dirt.
Right. I guess we'll never know. Well, Peter, what is going on your channel in the near future?
Okay, so on Monday, I'm probably going to rehash a lot of stuff that we're talking about right now. I'm talking to a guy, and you can look him up. He has a website called Sheepdog Apologetics. Young Earth Creationist. Spoken to him. I always do an intake to see what a person is like and whether or not I can have a decent conversation, because I'm not interested in dumpster fires anymore. They're nice to watch. They get all the views. I get it. I want to have a decent conversation. I want people to come to my channel and actually see that we can have the conversation, and maybe, and just maybe, that's how we will reach people. So I'm looking forward to this one. Lilith is going to be my co-host for this one. And other than that, on Saturday, I'm going to produce 2 more shows on Ross' channel. We will be reading the Bible cover to cover. So this is a project that's going to keep us busy for a couple of years. And immediately after that, we're going to read the Book of Mormon. And for the Book of Mormon, we've got a nice crowd. So we've got Jimmy Snow, we've got Mr. Deity, who's a very fun guy. While reading the Book of Mormon, I have to say, I wasn't expecting that. So I'm looking forward to that. We did shift the shows from Sunday to Saturday because of the incredible amount of atheist content that is already being put out on a Sunday. So and
we put out more than the churches do.
Yes, and so we have to. It's our hobby. It's what you do on the Sabbath day because you can't work. So we need to shift it to the Saturday. Right. So yeah, that is coming up. And then I will not give away who it is, but I've also talked to a certain person that I just invited onto your channel for a chat, which is he's a very likable man, good man to have a conversation with, and another man who has written a book that we need to have him change the title of. I mean,
I mean, technically, it's not wrong. It's just that it gets misunderstood. So,
yes.
But anyway, we'll tell you guys all about that probably Monday.
So Monday we'll reveal the first one. For the one that I just mentioned, we're going to set that up first, and once we know when that is going to happen, then we'll tell you who it is.
Yes, I mean we have confirmation on his end. I actually sent him the time that we'll be doing it. I think yesterday. But other than that, we have confirmation, so we should be good to go.
Great. So keep an eye on Jackson's Twitter.
Yep. Over here, I guess we'll just be continuing with the Ancestor's Tale. The Howler Monkey's Tale is still next, and we mentioned that last week. Haven't really worked on it much. This past week, really. But I'll get on that, probably. Let's see. That's really... And then we'll continue this, of course, next... Or, well, not next Thursday.
How
We'll have
far
the
are
interview
we
next
in?
Thursday, and then we'll continue it the next Thursday.
How far are we
For
in?
the book?
Yes.
Well, I closed out of it, unfortunately. We're in there. We're in chapter 4. We're at the end of chapter 4, basically. Out of how many were there? Like 12 chapters. We said we weren't gonna read all of them because the last like 4 or 5 are about theology, something like that. So
let me see.
I don't remember. Do you have it on hand?
Did man get here by evolution? I have to reload because I might be
closed
able
out of it, so now it should be available.
I can borrow it for 1 hour. Okay. So okay. So we have we're on chapter 4. What does the
chapter 4?
Yeah.
Yes.
What does the fossil record show? So we have 5 until 15 to go. So yeah, we'll probably have a few more episodes. The next.
So how many episodes are about theology?
Oh,
is it the last 5 or?
It starts at chapter 10, Living Testimony to a Creator. But then we go back in chapter 11, Why Do So Many Believe Evolution? Which I think is one we should cover. Then
I'll
we
can and I'll see if it's...
We can skip 12.
If the answer is just sin.
Yeah, we can skip 12, which is who or what was responsible for man's wickedness. God. So why has wickedness been permitted for so long? Again, answer God. How much longer will it be? Answer, we don't know. And then 15, a marvelous future. So that should be the end of religion. Oh no, sorry, I'm just joking. But yeah, I think after
Okay.
we did 9. 9 is how old is man. Then I think maybe we can cover why do so many believe in evolution. I think that's one that we should cover. Why do so many believe in evolution?
So you said 9. So that's 6 more chapters.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Mm-hmm.
Good stuff. Alrighty. Well, unless do you have anything else you want to add?
No, I'm good. I'm good.
I'm
going to go to bed because I'm awaiting a parcel tomorrow. I'm still trying to design a scooter and trying to get the parts. I should have just checked that nothing from this particular model is available anymore because the last one was made in 1999, and so yeah, I do stupid stuff, but it's going to be good.
Retro. Well, good. Thank you for hosting and co-hosting as always.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
Thank you, everybody in the side chat for watching. Brian Stevens, Marianne the Night Owl, Mackenzie Brown, Guitar Dog, Smitty, everybody who was there. Thank you. Appreciate all of you. And we will see you all next time.
Bye, everyone.